You guys ever seen those Helinox chairs? Because I'm literally sitting in one right now. I was texting with my buddy Trey just a few minutes ago, and I told him I got one because he had one on our trip to Utah a couple years ago on our mutual friend and mutual client JM Sheep Hunt, and I saw him whip that sucker out and sit down in it to start glassing, and I was like, "What is that?" And I picked it up, and it was so light. I was like, "Man, that wouldn't be too much weight to throw in your backpack to have a nice camp chair." Flash forward almost 2 years, and I finally got one because JM and I are going up to Colorado next week to get some high altitude hiking in, do some backpacking, camp, and do some fly fishing. Partly just to go have a good trip, but also partly as a training trip to continue in his progression towards getting ready for Nepal in 2028. So we're getting it up to some altitude. Obviously, it's not going to help with any kind of adaptation between now and then, but just getting on some terrain, hiking around, teaching him to fly fish because he's never fly fished before. And so we're going to catch some trout, camp. My dog Ruth's coming along. And I figured it would just, it was the perfect excuse to buy one of these chairs. I mean, for a camp chair, they're kind of expensive. It was like $150, but I figure I'll probably use the hell out of it. So, here I sit. I'm gonna say I don't think Trey thought that I would actually sit in this chair to do the podcast. I'm literally surrounded by comfortable leather chairs, and I'm sitting in this damn thing to record this. Anyway, so we're going to talk about training in July during this podcast. Before I get into it, I wrote an article about all this too. I'm going to link it in the show notes so you can go read about it. So everything I say is going to be a riff off of what I wrote in the article, so you can kind of get the double whammy with all this. So, but when you look at July, we have different timings for different seasons. I have one client who's going on a sheep hunt literally next week. I have another client that's going on a sheep hunt. He leaves on like August 6th to go on that. But the rest of us, we're looking at like September 1st, maybe October for rifle season and or when other upland seasons start, things like that. So for most of us, we're looking at like a 6 to 8 week window before the season starts. And so this is a really important time of year for us. I mean, it's all important, right? Because, one of our main things is we train year round, because not only does it keep us ready and continue to get us ready for the next hunting season, but our longevity, our health, everything depends on us staying fit, staying ready, staying strong, having our endurance. And another thing to keep in mind is that, and this is a thing that I say a lot, but I don't think a lot of people know, is that you can continue to develop your aerobic system and not get it to its peak for a decade or more. And it can take people that do a lot of training volume, really a decade to max out everything that their aerobic system is capable of. And so if you're training year round, you're continually just improving your conditioning, your endurance, and it's going to pay dividends, not just in the mountains, but also in your everyday life, and so that you can continue to do what you want to do when you're 80. So while I say that July is super important, it's all really important, but we're at a pivotal kind of transition point in the preseason right now that we have to use well, is the easiest way to say it. And so when we think about what we need to do right now to set ourselves up for success in a month and a half, we need to be acclimated to heavier packs. We need to make sure that our strength endurance and muscular endurance is in a good place. We need to revive our strength, not necessarily revive it, but make sure where it needs to be. And I'm talking about our just regular relative strength and maximal strength, to make sure that they're where they need to be. And we need to start to shift the way that we condition so that we're ready for long days underneath our pack. And we need to make sure that we're ready to move in the mountains with low cost to our bodies, but also so that we don't get injured, right? So we can handle awkward positions, whether it's stepping over something, turning your ankle, falling, God forbid, all of these things, and it's not whether or not you're going to fall or whether or not you're going to twist your ankle. It's just when it's going to happen. So you have to have your joints ready for that kind of stuff. So those are the things that we really need to look at right now. And I say it's a transition because we just spent, 6 weeks during the early preseason, kind of in the middle of the preseason, and we're just transitioning into the last few phases of preseason training before we get to hunting season. So what are the things that we need to do to approach this? Heavy pack acclimation is an important thing. I think a lot of people go about it the wrong way. I think they do it in an unsafe way, and I think they do it with too much volume. Really, you just need to feel what it feels like and do it in a safe environment. Both, you need to feel it so you have the confidence, right, of knowing that, hey, if I put 80 pounds on my back, 100 pounds on my back during a pack out, I know what it feels like and I know I can handle it. It also, getting a handful of sessions in with heavier weight is also going to build some resiliency in your frame. You'll adapt to that, and your core strength will improve. The way that your shoulders carry the weight, the way that your weight sits on your hips, you will adapt to that. It's also a really great way to make sure that you figure out your pack with that amount of weight in it and where you need things to sit, so you can make adjustments. It's almost like practice for when you load it up when things are going to be heavier. So that's something that we need to do. Since I've started Pack Mule, what used to be Human Predator Pack Mule, we've done this the same way, and we use high intensity continuous step ups for this. Why? Well, for a handful of reasons. First, because it's safer. Putting 80 pounds on your back and going out on a trail a handful of times throughout the summer is, while it might be helpful, is also a recipe for missing your hunt, because, you set yourself up for injury. You're going to beat the piss out of your body more. It's going to be way more stressful. So I don't see a need for it, because, like my college football coaches, their philosophy was, you save the nasty stuff for game day. So we didn't really tackle at practice. We didn't hit that hard at practice. Once the season started, we knew our assignments. We practiced our assignments. We did a little bit of a thud, and then we went out and we let it out on Saturday. And, because we practiced being in a good position for a tackle, being where we needed to be in the field, understanding our assignments, we went out and we played just fine. We didn't go into Saturday with the hell kicked out of us. And that analogy fits perfectly for us. We don't want to go into hunting season, having already kicked the hell out of ourselves. We want to feel good. And so we need to save that shit for game day. And if you're getting in enough rucking volume and you get in the pack acclimation via things like high intensity continuous step ups, you'll be ready to do what you need to do. If you've done all of your other conditioning, your other pack training, you'll be fine. So we use high intensity continuous step ups. So we've been doing them during the earlier parts of the preseason, but not with as much volume. So we've worked up to like one 15-minute set with somewhere between 35 and 45% of our body weight on our backs, depending on where someone is and what they need. So during this, as we transition into the latter part of July, middle to latter part of July, we'll add more volume to that. So we'll do 2 sets, working up to accruing more volume with high intensity continuous step ups. Now, if you've never heard me talk about this, never read anything that I've written about this, a high intensity continuous step up is a form of strength endurance and muscular endurance training while also acclimating us to our heavy pack. The thing that's great about it is it helps us manage fatigue, but also not push us to fatigue, so anything stupid could happen. So what you do is you get a 12-inch box, you put the weight in your pack, you do 1 step every 4 to 8 seconds, and then you just moderate your pace based on your heart rate. So if you want to use more weight, and let's say you put 70, 80 pounds in your pack, and if you're doing a 1 step every 4 to 5 seconds, and you notice it's just jacking your heart rate up, you can do one of 2 things. You can take the weight down and keep the same pace, or you can slow down because you want to keep the weight in your pack. This allows you to train your fast twitch muscles for muscular endurance. It improves their oxidative capacity, which is their ability to use fat and work aerobically. But it also gives you that chance to get into your heavy pack. And we do it on a 12-inch box because that's like right in the midpoint of the average steps someone takes while moving up a grade, a steep grade, that is. So the average step is somewhere between 8 and 14 inches. So if you put, depending on someone's height, leg length, all of that kind of stuff. So that 12-inch box is a perfect place. And we do it this way because we're just stepping up and down off of a box. So it limits the risk of something silly happening. It's a very controlled environment. So one step every 4 to 8 seconds, depending on the weight that you use. And, if you haven't been doing a lot of rucking or had a lot of pack weight in, our folks have been gradually increasing pack weight and volume throughout, the year, honestly. And so they're at the point where this kind of acclimation is going to do something good for them. If you haven't been and you just got started, like, don't throw 60, 70, 80 pounds in your pack and do this. Start with something lighter, because you don't have the resilience built up to do this the way that you need to. It's likely going to drive your heart rate through the roof, and you're also just setting yourself up to get beat up. So if you haven't been doing it, you need to start lighter. So we use this to acclimate to our pack. We'll do a few weeks of it, and then we'll stop, because like I talked about earlier, in some of our content, you do your heaviest rucking in the middle of the summer, start to tailor it back so that you don't give yourself too much stress leading up to hunting season. You want that wave where you adapt to it. Okay, we have that adaptation, and then we can maintain it with maybe one or a few more heavy rucks, and while also making sure that our rucking volume is where it needs to be. And we'll talk about that just a little bit later. So we want to acclimate to heavy packs. We want to do it now. We want to know that we have the confidence and we have the frame and the muscular endurance to be able to handle it, while also practicing loading our pack with a bunch of weight and where we need shit to sit, So it's a really helpful thing. The next thing that we want to do in July is make a transition from strength endurance training, which is relatively heavy, but not as heavy as like a max or relative strength training, to max or relative strength maintenance. We want to prime our nervous system so that we can get more out of it as we get closer to hunting season. So for us, we work on maximal strength early in the year. We do some more volume of strength work in the later parts of the fall, and then we kind of touch on it throughout the spring and the summer. And this is one of those points in the year that we touch on it, because we just came through a big block of strength endurance work, which increases our strength capacity, our ability to use strength over time. Now we push those strength levels back up and then go back into more capacity work so that we have a nice little wave there, right? So we have the ability to use the strength we built over time, jack it back up a little bit, and then increase that capacity so we have access to more strength over time as we go into hunting season. And so that's what we're going to do right now in the next coming training phase, is back off of the strength endurance work. We can get some maintenance work out of that with the high intensity continuous step ups. We'll push our strength a little bit. It's not going to be crazy high volume because we don't need it, because we've done a good job building the base of it throughout the year so far. So we'll touch that, give our nervous system what we need, then go back into strength endurance work that's going to be more specific towards what we're going to be doing when we go out to hunt. But we need that primer. Every once in a while, you got to come back and prime things. Good training works in cyclical waves where, volume intensity of one thing comes up, then it goes back down to maintenance, and you just rotate those things throughout the year. We do it with every quality that we train. So, for example, we did some high intensity conditioning earlier in the late off season into the early preseason to prime us to get into the more specific work of the preseason. So we just have, our heart works a little bit faster, can pump a little bit harder, get more blood out. So we use it in that way earlier. Now, as we get later into the preseason, we'll bring back some high intensity training, just to prime that back up and have some more anaerobic adaptations. So maybe you have to have a hard push uphill. Maybe you got to run. Maybe you got to sprint. Maybe you got to do something, and then get yourself calmed down to be able to get to where you need to be to get into a shot and control your breathing. So we'll bring that kind of stuff back, but it goes cyclical in waves. So, you move between developmental doses of things, which is giving it enough to really push it, and then stimulatory, which is enough to maintain it. And so we're going into a stimulatory dose of strength training to bring that back and give us what we need out of it. So it's an important thing to do this time of year. I think a lot of people ignore that, and they just think about volume or muscular endurance training and all that kind of stuff, and which is important, but we need to touch on this for at least a few weeks to bring it back to the levels that we need it to be before we get back into more strength endurance and muscular endurance type training, which we just spent a whole training 6 weeks on, So we're shifting back into that. It's important to prime your nervous system to get ready for what's to come. And so you have access to it. The other thing that we want to look at is making sure that we're doing movements that are awkward. And that is because there aren't any straight lines in the mountains. You're going to have to step over things. You're going to have to step under things. And so, we talked a little bit about this during the June episode, but we take the general mobility we build throughout the year and then put it into specific use. So, we make sure that our ankles are resilient while they're on the ground. So if you roll them, they're prepared to be rolled, and you don't get injured, or you don't get injured as bad. We're going to step over things. We're going to step under things. We're going to do lunges and step up variations from awkward angles, because that's what you're going to do when you get it out into the mountains. And so it's important to we started that stuff earlier in the preseason, and it's important to carry it forward through the rest of the preseason to continue to prep for hunting. Another aspect of this is continuing to prepare for downhill stuff. So our quads have the resilience they need to handle downhills, because you fry them on a downhill, the next uphill is going to suck a whole lot, or you're going to have to take longer to recover than you need. So we don't want to blow up our quads either on uphills or downhills. And so we're going to focus on making sure that we continue our downhill work progression with things like forward lunges. We'll do some backward treadmill walking stuff. I don't know that it's as impactful as a lot of people make it out to be, but it's a little extra volume. So we'll build it into some warm-ups and stuff like that. I mean, the best thing for that is to actually get out on terrain. I know that not everybody has access to that, and I get that. So that's another reason that we focus some of our strength training and other aspects of our conditioning on doing that kind of work. But getting out on real terrain, once you build the raw materials in the gym, is going to be the best thing that carries over for you. But if you live in Missouri, that's probably not an option for you, because it's flatter than a goddamn pancake out there. So we want to make sure that we focus on that as well. The next thing we want to look at is kind of a flip-flop of our conditioning. So through the last training phase, we did long general work. Okay, so we would run or hike or do really light pack work for our long aerobic sessions. So we're talking anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours plus, 2.5 hours, something like that. We kept it general because throughout the week we were doing heavier uphill pack work. So I didn't want to give everybody too much stress and say, okay, well, we're going to pack heavy during the week and we're going to pack heavy on the weekend and do it for longer, because it would have beat everybody into the ground. So now we're getting to the point where things need to be more specific. And what are we going to do when we go out there? Most of our packs are going to be, going in somewhere probably around 25 or so percent of our body weight, 25 to maybe 30. And so we're going to go out and do long rucks with 20% of our body weight, something like that, because it's more specific. So we'll shift our longer conditioning to that, and then our shorter conditioning will get more general. Maintain our aerobic system. That's where we'll build in some more of the high intensity work, things like that, so that we have a nice balance, but we don't give ourselves so much stress that we beat the shit out of ourselves. And another way to look at it is there's kind of a sandwich between, we have the high intensity continuous training, which is really heavy pack work. And then we have moderate long pack work on the weekends. And then combining those things allows you to be able to live in the middle well when it's time to go out. And maybe you're a 190 pound person and you got to carry 50 or 60 pounds on your back. Well, you've worked at each end of the spectrum that allows you to meet in the middle and carry that well. So can people still do some ruck work during the week? If they want to, I guess they can, but we're shifting more towards the general aspect of things throughout the week, along with doing the high intensity continuous training with the step ups and the long pack work on the weekends. And then we'll shift back to kind of balancing that volume out a little bit more as we get closer to the hunting season. But we've done so much rucking over the past few months that people are ready. Now we just have to make it specific. They're resilient enough under their pack. Now we just have to do the specific stuff of being able to be acclimated to a heavier pack, and then also being able to pack for and hike with weight on our back for long periods of time. And so we'll shift towards that for specific preparation and carry that stuff forward towards hunting season. So when it comes to July, you really look at it as, especially as you get to the middle of July, a transition between early preseason training and then late preseason training, with this little shift in the middle where we revive our strength as we progress our conditioning towards stuff that's more specific. That's really what July should look like. And then August, especially, this training phase will go, into the early weeks of August. And then the last weeks of August should be really specific stuff. And then a little bit of high intensity stuff to kind of help people, quote unquote, peak before they go out and hunt. So that is how we train as we go into the middle parts of July. And we do it because it is the best way that I've found to do it. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't do it that way. We'd be doing something else. But that's what we're doing. If you're not training with us, why aren't you? But your setup should mimic something like this if you've been doing the work all year to build up to it. If not, things should likely look a little different for you because you're at a different place on the training progression. So if you hear this and you're like, oh man, I've been doing stuff that's similar to that, throughout the year, then you're likely good to adopt something like this. But if you haven't been, you need to start farther back the path, and continue to work on that progression. You're not going to get as far as our people have before hunting season, but that's just the deal. I said in a post on Instagram, I think last week, it was last week, you can't cram 6 months worth of training into 2 months. You just can't do it. And trying to do it is just going to set you up for success, likely make your fitness go backwards because you'll give yourself too much stress, and set you up for an injury, if not in training, but when you get out to hunt. So just don't do that. Be safe, be smart, progress in an intelligent way. Don't try to force it. Okay. So I'm going to put the link to the article in the show notes. Another thing, I released a new resource for hunters over 50. One of the things that I've realized is a lot of those hunters are underserved. A lot of our folks in the Pack Mule Elite program are over 50 years old, and there's not a good solution for them. And there's not, other than Pack Mule, of course, but there's not a lot of good information out there about what to do if you're getting a little bit later in years and you want to continue to hunt, and how to manage your training, your lifestyle, and your nutrition. There's a quiz in there inside of the PDF that helps you figure out where you're at right now, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what do you need to work on. And it also includes a sample training template that you can use. On top of that, there's a bunch of great information about sleep, nutrition, and training. So the link for that is also in the show notes. It's 100% free. Download it and read through it and start using the information that it gives to you. As always, I appreciate you watching and listening, and I will talk to you next week.